Vanessa sat on the cold tiled floor of their comfortable sitting room, her big round eyes fixed on her mother, Amaka. A plate of steamy jollof rice, perfectly garnished with fried plantain and chicken, sat on Amaka's lap. The aroma filled the room, teasing Vanessa's nostrils and making her stomach tighten in hunger. She had just eaten her own food a few hours ago, a simple plate of rice without meat or plantain. But as always, her mother's food seemed more appealing. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the connection, the warmth of eating together, the little bites mothers always shared with their children, sometimes playfully teasing them before putting a spoonful in their mouth. But Amaka was not that kind of mother. "Mommy, please let me have some," Vanessa pleaded, her tiny hands reaching out towards the plate. Amaka didn't even look at her. She simply moved her plate further from her daughter's reach, chewing noisily. "You've eaten your own, Vanessa," she said in a flat tone, scooping a large spoonful of rice into her mouth. "But I'm still hungry," Vanessa whined, her lips quivering. "That's your business," Amaka replied. "You should have eaten more when you had your own food. Let me enjoy mine in peace." Vanessa's face fell. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She had cried many times over this, but it never changed anything. Her mother never shared. Not food, not snacks, not even a single biscuit. She had watched other children at school talk about how their mothers always gave them bites of their food, how they even let them sip from their drinks. Vanessa wished she could say the same, but she knew the truth. Her mother simply didn't believe in sharing. Even her father, Okoro, had scolded Amaka about it countless times. "Amaka, it's not just food," he had told her one night when Vanessa had gone to bed after another evening of crying. "You are teaching her that being selfish is okay. That's dangerous." "It's not selfishness," Amaka had argued. "It's discipline. Children should learn to eat their own food and not beg for what is not theirs." "And who told you that discipline?" Okoro had countered. "You don't see how hot she looks? You don't see the disappointment in her eyes every time you push her away?" Amaka had waved him off as usual. To her, it was a small issue. Vanessa would grow up and understand. But Vanessa didn't understand. All she knew was that her mother refused to share, no matter how much she cried. And now, as she sat watching her mother eat, she felt something deeper than hunger. She felt rejection. She stopped begging. Instead, she got up quietly and went to her room, closing the door behind her. She lay on her small bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why her mother didn't love her enough to share something as little as food. And in that moment, something inside her started to change. She would stop asking. She would stop begging. She would stop expecting. And most importantly, she would never share either. That evening, Okoro returned home from work, his shirt damp with sweat. He worked as a mechanic, fixing cars under the hot sun every day. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed the heavy silence in the house. Usually, Vanessa would run to him, hugging his legs and telling him stories about her day. But today, she was nowhere to be found. "Vanessa!" he called, looking around, but no response. He glanced towards the dining area and found Amaka sitting at the table, munching on a plate of fried yam and egg sauce alone. His eyes narrowed. He already knew what had happened. "Where is Vanessa?" he asked. Amaka shrugged, dipping another piece of yam into the sauce. "She's in her room." Okoro sighed and walked to Vanessa's room. He knocked gently before pushing the door open. There she was, lying on her bed, her back turned to the door. "Vanessa, my baby," Okoro called softly, sitting beside her. "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, in a small sad voice, she said, "Mommy doesn't love me." Okoro's heart clenched. He took a deep breath. "Why would you say that?" "She never gives me food," Vanessa said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were teary, but she had refused to cry. Even when I tell her I'm hungry, even when I beg her, she just eats everything by herself. Okoro sighed heavily and rubbed his daughter's back. This was exactly what he had warned Amaka about. It wasn't just about food. It was about how it made their daughter feel. Listen to me, Vanessa, he said gently. Your mother loves you. She just has a bad habit, but that doesn't mean you should feel unloved. Vanessa looked at him. Then why doesn't she show it? That question hit Okoro hard. How does a child measure love? Through affection, through kindness, through care. And Amaka was failing in that regard. Okoro stood up. He had let this go on for too long. He marched back to the dining area, where Amaka was now sipping a bottle of drink. He stood in front of her, hands on his hips. Amaka, we need to talk. Amaka sighed dramatically. About what? About Vanessa. About you. He folded his arms. You are hurting that girl, and I won't allow it. Amaka scoffed. Hurting her? Over food, right? Yes, over food. Okoro snapped. It's not just food. It's rejection. It's emotional neglect. That girl is starting to believe that you don't love her. Amaka's brow twitched, but she masked her emotions quickly. That nonsense. She knows I love her. I provide for her, don't I? Provision is not the same as affection, Okoro said, his voice calmer now. She is a child, Amaka. She learns from you. Right now, all you are teaching her is how to be selfish and cold-hearted. Amaka rolled her eyes. I'm teaching her independence. No, Okoro said firmly. You are teaching her loneliness. A brief silence stretched between them. For the first time, Amaka seemed to pause. But then, as always, she brushed it off. You are overreacting, she muttered. She'll be fine. Okoro exhaled sharply, frustration bubbling in his chest. He had tried. He had warned her. If she didn't change, something bad would happen. The next morning, Vanessa woke up feeling different. She didn't run to hug her father before he left for work. She didn't even greet her mother. Instead, she dressed quietly, packed her school bag, and walked into the kitchen, where Amaka was finishing her breakfast, a plate of steamy fried rice and egg sauce. The smell made Vanessa's stomach growl, but she didn't ask for a bite. She had learnt a lesson. Amaka noticed the way Vanessa stared at her plate but didn't say anything. In her mind, she was proud. Good. She's finally learning not to be greedy. Your food is in the flask, Amaka said casually, pointing at a small container on the counter. Vanessa nodded, took the flask, and walked out without another word. Amaka watched her go, a small smirk on her lips. She's becoming independent, she thought. She wouldn't be a spoiled child. But what Amaka didn't realize was that Vanessa wasn't learning independence. She was learning rejection. During lunch at school, Vanessa sat alone, staring at the container of food her mother had packed. Beans again. She sighed. She wasn't hungry anymore. Her best friend, Ada, came over, her own lunchbox in hand. The moment she opened it, the delicious aroma of jollof rice and chicken filled the air. Vanessa's stomach clenched. Ada noticed her friend's quiet mood. Vanessa, why are you not eating? She asked, scooping a spoonful of her rice. Vanessa shrugged. I'm not hungry. Ada frowned. But you always say you love jollof rice. You can have some of mine. She held out her spoon, but Vanessa shook her head. No, I don't want. Ada blinked in surprise. But we always share. Vanessa simply looked away, avoiding her friend's confused gaze. At that moment, something inside her changed. She had spent years begging her mother for just one bite, one crumb, only to be pushed away. If my mother doesn't share, why should I? Vanessa had begged enough. Now, she would do the same to others. At evening, Amaka sat on the couch, casually munching on chin-chin from a small plastic container while watching the TV. Vanessa walked into the room and sat on the floor, hugging her knees. She didn't say anything. She just watched. Normally, this was the moment when she would have asked for some, stretching out her small hands, her eyes full of longing. But today, she didn't ask, she just stared. Amaka noticed the change. She popped another piece of chin-chin into her mouth and smirked. "You don't want any?" Vanessa shook her head. "No." Amaka raised an eyebrow. "Good, at least you are learning not to be greedy." Vanessa said nothing. She stood up and walked away, disappearing into her room without looking back. Okoro, who had been quietly watching the exchange from the dining table, let out a deep sigh. He shook his head and muttered under his breath, "This woman will not hear word." But even he didn't realize just how much damage had already been done. The next weekend, Okoro came home from work, carrying a plastic bag filled with groceries. He placed it on the table and handed Vanessa a pack of biscuits. "Here, my girl," he said warmly. "Take this to school on Monday and share with your friends." Vanessa nodded, taking the biscuit to her room. On Monday, during lunch, Ada sat next to her as usual. "Did you bring anything today?" Ada asked. Vanessa nodded and pulled out the biscuits. Ada smiled. "Yay, can I have one?" Vanessa hesitated. The memory of her mother flashed in her mind. How Amaka always kept her food to herself. How she never shared no matter how much Vanessa cried. Her fingers tightened around the packet. "No," she said flatly. Ada's face fell. "What?" "I don't want to share," Vanessa muttered, turning away. Ada stared at her in shock. "Vanessa, why are you acting like this?" Vanessa didn't answer. For the rest of the day, Ada barely spoke to her, and by the next morning, other classmates had noticed Vanessa's sudden change. She doesn't share anymore. She's stingy now. And slowly, Vanessa's world began to shrink. She had pulled others away, just as Amaka had pushed her. But the worst part, she didn't even feel bad about it. Not yet. At home, Okoro started noticing changes in his daughter's behavior. One evening, he brought home suya, spicy grilled meat wrapped in newspaper. The moment he sat down, he called Vanessa. "Come, my girl, let's eat together," he said, tearing a juicy piece. Vanessa took a piece for herself and immediately walked away. Won't you share with your mother?" Okoro asked, glancing at Amaka, who was sipping a bottle of malt. Vanessa shrugged. "She has her own." Okoro's hand froze in mid-air. He turned and looked at Amaka, whose smirk had vanished. For the first time, Amaka felt a strange discomfort. Okoro sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Amaka, do you see now?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "This is what I was trying to warn you about." Amaka scoffed. "Warn me about what?" "About the kind of person you are raising," he said. "You think you were teaching her discipline, but what you really taught her is how to be cold." Amaka's face twitched. "She's just learning to be strong." "No," Okoro corrected, shaking his head. "She's learning to be you." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. For the first time, Amaka didn't have a reply. And that night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she felt something she had never felt before. Doubt. Had she been wrong all along? Vanessa's transformation didn't take long to show its effects. At school, her friends started withdrawing from her. During lunch, Ada no longer sat with her. Instead, she sat with other classmates, laughing and sharing food. Vanessa noticed, but she acted like she didn't care. At home, things became even worse. One evening, Okoro came home with a loaf of freshly baked bread. It was still warm, soft, and inviting. He placed it on the dining table and called Vanessa. "Come, my girl, let's eat," he said, tearing a piece for himself. Vanessa took a slice and went to her room. "Won't you share with your mother?" Okoro asked, glancing at Amaka, who was watching TV. Vanessa looked at him, then at her mother. Slowly, she shook her head. "No, she has her own." Okoro frowned. "Vanessa, that's not nice. You should." "It's mine," Vanessa interrupted, her voice firm. "Just like mommy's food is always hers." Silence fell over the room. Okoro's gaze shifted to Amaka, whose smirk slowly faded. It was in that moment that Amaka finally understood. Her daughter had learned from her. She had become her. One afternoon, Vanessa came home from school looking furious. "What's wrong?" Okoro asked. Vanessa threw her school bag on the floor. "Nobody likes me anymore." "Why do you say that?" "Because they said I'm stingy," Vanessa shouted. "They don't play with me anymore. They don't share with me, even Ada." Okoro sighed deeply and rubbed his forehead. "Vanessa, do you remember how you felt when your mother didn't share with you?" Vanessa blinked. "That's how your friends feel now," he said gently. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. She had been hurting others the same way she had been hurt. She turned to her mother. "Mommy, is that how you feel when I don't share with you?" Amaka didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she felt the sting of her own selfishness. A heavy silence filled the room after Vanessa's question. She looked up at her mother, waiting, hoping for an answer, but Amaka said nothing. For the first time in life, she didn't have a response. Her chest felt tight. Her mouth was dry. She had never cared about her stinginess before, never thought it was a problem. But now, looking into her daughter's teary eyes, she saw something frightening. She saw herself. Vanessa had become just like her, and for the first time, Amaka didn't like what she saw. She glanced at her husband, but he only shook his head, as if saying, "This is your mess to fix." Vanessa wiped her tears and turned away. "It's okay, Mommy," she said quietly. "I understand now." She picked up her school bag and walked to her room, shutting the door softly behind her. The silence in the house became unbearable. Amaka's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the bottle of malt on the table, but when she lifted it to her lips, she stopped. Suddenly, it didn't taste as good anymore. That night, Amaka tossed and turned in bed. She stared at the ceiling, memories flashing through her mind. She saw Vanessa as a baby, her chubby hands reaching for a piece of biscuit, but Amaka had pulled it away. She remembered Vanessa's first birthday, when Okoro had playfully tried to feed her a spoon of his cake. Amaka had scolded him for spoiling the child. She recalled every time Vanessa had begged, cried, and given up, and then she thought of herself as a child. She remembered her own mother, a woman just like her. Her mother never shared, never showed warmth, never gave without expecting something in return. Amaka had spent her childhood learning to fend for herself, believing that love didn't mean giving, it meant surviving. She had inherited selfishness like an unwanted heirloom, and now she had passed it down to Vanessa. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. Had she been wrong all along? For the first time in her life, Amaka doubted herself. The next morning, Amaka woke up to the smell of frying eggs. She got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, surprised to see her daughter standing on a stool, carefully flipping an egg in the pan. A loaf of bread sat open on the counter. Okoro was standing beside her, watching protectively. "What's going on?" Amaka asked, her voice groggy. "Vanessa wanted to make breakfast," Okoro replied. Vanessa turned to her mother, her face blank. "I made enough for me and Daddy." Amaka blinked. "What about me?" Vanessa shrugged. "You have your own, Mom." The words hit her like a slap. Amaka opened her mouth, but no words came out. So this was what it felt like? She watched as her daughter plated the eggs and carried her own plate to the table, completely ignoring her. Okoro took his plate but didn't sit. Instead, he stood beside Amaka, watching her reaction. For the first time, Amaka felt lonely. She had spent years rejecting her child, pushing her away, telling her to fend for herself. And now, when she needed warmth, Vanessa was doing the same to her. She sat down slowly, staring at the empty table in front of her. Something in her heart cracked. "Vanessa," her voice was quiet, uncertain. Her daughter didn't even look up. She simply ate. Amaka's eyes burned, and she felt something strange, something unfamiliar. Guilt. Deep, unbearable guilt. She pushed her chair back, stood up, and walked away. For the first time in a long time, Amaka felt like crying. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Amaka barely spoke. Vanessa didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care anymore. By evening, Amaka couldn't take it anymore. She walked into Vanessa's room, where her daughter was lying on the bed, reading a storybook. "Vanessa," Amaka said softly. Vanessa didn't look up. Amaka hesitated, then sat on the bed. "I want to talk to you." Vanessa sighed and finally met her mother's gaze. "What is it, Mom?" Amaka swallowed hard. She had never apologized before. Not to Okoro, not to anyone. It felt unnatural, but she had no choice. "I was wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa blinked. "What?" Amaka took a shaky breath. "I was wrong, my dear. About everything. About not sharing. About pushing you away. About making you feel like I don't love you." Vanessa's eyes widened, shock written all over her face. "I thought I was teaching you discipline," Amaka continued. "But I see now that I was only teaching you how to be alone, how to be selfish, and I don't want that for you." Vanessa's finger tightened around her book. "So, you do love me?" Amaka's heart broke into pieces. She pulled Vanessa into a tight hug. For the first time in years, "More than anything, my baby, more than anything." For a moment, Vanessa didn't move. Then slowly, she wrapped her small arms around her mother. "Okay," she whispered, and just like that, something changed. From that day on, Amaka changed. She started sharing her food, first with small bites, then with full portions. She surprised Vanessa with snacks after school. She even started sharing with Okoro, who raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. Little by little, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching television, Amaka opened a pack of chin-chin. Vanessa looked at her, waiting to see if she would push it away. Instead, Amaka held it out. "Here, have some." Vanessa's face lit up with pure happiness. She reached in, took a handful, and grinned. "Thanks, Mommy." Amaka smiled. For the first time, sharing didn't feel like a loss. It felt like love. And as Vanessa happily munched beside her, Amaka realized something else. She wasn't just teaching Vanessa, she was healing herself. The moral of this story is that selfishness isn't just a habit, it's a cycle. Amaka had inherited it from her mother, just as Vanessa had started inheriting it from her. But cycles can be broken. Parents must be intentional about what they pass down to their children. Every little action matters. Sharing is more than just giving food or things. It's a way of showing love, kindness, and connection. If we don't teach children how to share, we teach them how to be alone. Amaka almost lost her daughter's love for a habit she didn't even realize was dangerous. But she chose to change. And in that change, she found something she had never truly experienced before. She found real love. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you do, you will love the next one. Click to watch it now. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.